Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today I have some bad news. I wish I had better news, but it is what it is. We are less than 30 days away from the drop of Shadowlands, not the pre-patch, at least what we know, the actual expansion, and we had unfortunately, some pretty big nerfs to Warlock Covenants, again, for a second week in a row. So, I want to talk about them today. There are a few changes. Necrolord was nerfed, and it was nerfed a lot worse than it even said in the patch notes that were data mined today. There are some more undocumented changes. We're going to look at that today from an affliction, destruction, and demonology perspective. Any weak auras, profiles, add-ons you see here are available to you guys for free on my Twitch. If you want to swing by and grab them, drop a follow, ask any questions, hang out anytime. That is the best way to get a hold of me. So, we're just going to jump into this. There's a decent bit to it. We're going to read over the patch notes, I guess the data mined class changes, and then we're just going to look at each spec as a whole. I don't really have any raw data. I have something to show you. Sims aren't out yet, which is one of the issues here. But for the most part, these nerfs are pretty big, so we can sort of just draw some relative conclusions in the first place. Starting off, Necrolord today. So they nerfed the actual impact damage of Decimating Bolt from 50% spell power to 30%. Not the end of the world, not the biggest deal. It is a bit of it's a nerf, but it's not that big of a deal because the main thing with Decimating Bolt was the damage amp that it gave to your Incinerates, or your Shadow Bolt, or your Drain Soul, or your Demon Bolt. Well, they cut that from 200 to 100% baseline. This is on top of the changes, the nerfs we got last week, so now it's been nerfed twice. So it's a baseline 100% damage amp to whatever spell you cast. Now, previously, it was 200, and it would go all the way up to 400. Well, spoilers ahead, they also nerfed the max percentage on Decimating Bolt, but it's not what you think. So just to reiterate here, it is nerfed for every single ability that it affects. Now there is some data mining, like tooltip errors here. It still only affects one Drain Soul. Now the nerf is so large, I hope that they revert it to going back to 3 Drain Souls, similar to how it is with Shadow Bolt or Demon Bolt or Incinerate, but we'll get to that. So a pretty big nerf to Decimating Bolt, which was looking like it could have been one of our probably the front runner Covenant again for Affliction with the Malefic Wrath Legendary, and good for Destro too. There's also hopes for Demonology, but hey, anything that's good for Demo is obviously going to get destroyed because Demonology is just, well, yeah. So, moving on though. If you guys like Venthyr or had any hopes of playing Venthyr, I have bad news for you. If you think Decimating Bolt was gutted, they gutted Venthyr, brought it out back, put it down twice, threw it in the dumpster, set it on fire, and sent it all the way down the river. It is beyond destroyed. They nerfed the impact damage by 80% spell power modifier, and then nerfed the dot by 50%. So this thing in game right now is dealing, I think, 1600 damage. The whole dot is. The Necrolord Night Fae dot is dealing twice that damage in game right now. Now I know it has AoE implications and it's a dot on every target, but one of the questions I got a lot on stream was, if I want to play Venthyr and Plus, how bad is it going to be in Raid? And I will say the Venthyr Impending Catastrophe dot was probably a bit, maybe a little bit too strong single target, and also had a lot of AoE implications. Well, I think it was gutted. It's gutted. So, unfortunately, if you want to be a vampire, well, I got bad news for you. So we can't be a Necrolord, you can't be a vampire anymore. Being real, though, the change, it was never our best single target ability, and it did have a lot of merit in Mythic Plus, but this is a pretty big gutting. Now, I want to say not every class, or we aren't the only class that got nerfs today. There were rogues like Serrated Bone Spike got nerfed, Hunters got nerfed a bit, which not enough. But there are a handful of other classes too. They've been tuning Covenant abilities for a couple weeks now. These are some pretty big changes. Scouring Tithe was nerfed. Now, the nerfs to Scouring Tithe really aren't that big compared to Catastrophe or Bolt. They nerfed the application damage of Scouring Tithe by essentially 25%, spell power wise, and then nerfed the dot here, I guess by like what, 15%, something like that, like the spell power modifier on that. So, like, we tested a bit with Scouring Tithe Affliction on stream earlier. It was dealing like 6.5 to 7.5% of our damage before the nerf. Now it's like around 5.5 to 6. In the end, we'll get into this. Scouring Tithe is still a dot that you can maintain for basically on one target for the whole duration, as long as it doesn't die, which gives you a 6 dot, a 5th 6 dot, however you want to look at it, depending on talent you're playing, to Rapture with. So it still adds a lot of extra value to Rapture. So as far as the Covenant nerfs go, Necro got hit pretty hard. Venthyr got destroyed. And Scouring Tithe, I don't know why it's got destroyed. And Scouring Tithe, it got nerfed, but not that big of a deal. Kyrian and Necrolord were already pretty close to each other. Necro was pulling up ahead again a bit in Sims when I'd seen for Affliction, but now it just is not. I haven't seen Sims, they're not done yet, but just applying logic here, doesn't seem like it's going to be very good anymore. Those are basically all the changes here. There were no changes to, oh, this was buffed. Our Conduit, Diabolic Bloodstone, was buffed again. So this is actually pretty big. A casual 10% leech up to 24% leech when anyone uses your health stone. It's pretty good. This is buffed. I don't know why it was OP at 5%, but I'll take it. No changes to Soul Rot today. Keep in mind it was buffed, I think, like 2 weeks ago. The main target that gets the dot on it, the damage was doubled essentially. So it's still there. In testing though, before comparing like Night Fade to Kyrian, I think Kyrian still had the edge when it came to Affliction, and it's better for Destro and things I feel. So I do want to show you a little bit here. So I did mention that Decimating Bolt, the baseline damage amp that I had before was 200%, and it went all the way to 400%. And now they nerfed it from 3 full Drain Soul channels to 1, but it still had that 200, 400, damage amp. Well, now it is 100%. This dummy is low, perfect. So we'll hit this dummy. The max damage amp we have now, 154. So it no longer goes to 400. It doesn't even go to 200 like you would logically expect it to. The max damage amp you can get is 159% on a target that has 0.00 health left, basically a dead dummy. So they gutted Necrolord. It has been gutted. The damage amp has been hit severely. So in addition to no longer having 3 Drain Souls you can cast, you have essentially probably a 200 or so % less buff when you're deep into execute. It's a pretty big nerf. It's unfortunate because that version of Affliction I enjoyed a good bit. Now you might be asking as well, like, okay, how does that work for Destruction? Well, Destro has the same thing pretty much. The same for Demonology. The difference is, Destro, Affliction also, if you're playing Shadow Bolt or not playing Drain Soul, has 3 charges of Decimating Bolt. For Destro, though, remember how they changed Fire and Brimstone like 2 builds ago to have Decimating Bolt deal less damage? Check this out. So, we'll go Inferno. 100% amp, same thing as basically Affliction was. Swap the Fire and Brimstone. 40%. It's 40%. So even with this thing hitting a target, like, it's still, the Incinerate you cleave are still not going to deal 100% damage. Like, it got gutted. But let's take a look at how much damage it gets when it targets at, say, 50% health here, damage amp-wise. It's baseline 40%. Oh, it's now 50%. Necrolord got dragged out back and put down, thrown into the dumpster, set on fire, and thrown into the ocean. They hit this thing pretty hard. So, now in the end, Fire and Brimstone was not really the play, I feel, in Mythic Plus. It was more or less Inferno. I think that's the best talent because of Rain of Fire being buffed damage-wise, it being a further increase to its damage. And once again, the Shard gen you got in your Rain of Chaos window was just really, really impressive. So, mainly the Necrolord changes revolve around Affliction, Lock, and Drain Soul. That build is, in my opinion, barring more tuning happening, more nerfs, that build is probably just not going to be a thing anymore. It was starting to pull ahead a little bit of Kyrian in like Sims we had seen last night. At this point, I don't really have much hope for it. Let's talk a little bit about the Scouring Tithe and Impending Catastrophe nerfs as well. Now, I did say we talk a little bit about the Venthyr Impending Catastrophe nerf. In the end, I haven't made a Venthyr character, but a tooltip was linked to me, and it is not dealing much damage at this point. I saw a tooltip saying about 1,700 damage the dot deals on every target. Now, once again, Impending Catastrophe does indeed have AoE implications. If I cast Scouring Tithe in a pack of 10 mobs, it's only going to dot one thing. If I cast Catastrophe, it's going to hit basically every mob with that dot. So it scales, when it comes to being an AoE or Mythic Plus. That's always been Venthyr Impending Catastrophe sort of niche, But looking at Scouring Tithe here, basically the impact damage of Scouring Tithe deals about as much as the whole dot does for Impending Catastrophe. Now, you can look at the dot damage on Scouring Tithe, and it beats Catastrophe over an 18-second duration. Catastrophe is on a 1-minute cooldown. Scouring Tithe is essentially on a 40-second one, but if the target doesn't die with this dot on it, it'll be reset, and you put it up again. So essentially, Scouring Tithe deals, 3 times Venthyr at this point. we tested with, my name is Cal Angel, by the way. I hope you guys like being Blue Angels as a Warlock. But we tested with Scouring Tithe, and this is a bit of a meme, I guess, a breakdown here, because we were playing with Creeping Death and dinking around a little bit. But Scouring Tithe was normally about 5 3/4, 6, like 5.6, 5.7 to 6% of our damage. This is post-nerf, obviously, here. So the dot is still there. In Rapture, outside of Creeping Death, playing Dark Soul was about 35, 36% of our damage. We actually played Soul Conduit. It was about 40. So for the most part, Scouring Tithe is still good. It's still fine. It's still solid. It got a bit of a nerf, but I mean, in the end, it's a permanent dot. Unless the target dies, which gives you 6 soul shards back, or 5. And if it's active all the time, it's just a 6 dot, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 that you maintain in your Rapture windows as Affliction. Now, we mentioned this build last time, comparatively to Necrolord with Drain Soul, it's a lot more movement friendly. You can redot 3 or 4 things in the move. Scouring Tithe, Unstable Affliction have very similar durations, 24 seconds and 18 or so. Sort of set it and forget it kind of dots. It's a different kind of gameplay. Necrolord was based around drain soul damage and big execute damage. This is more or less just juggling dots, which is not bad, but then again, your dots don't really hit very hard. But that's, you know, an issue in itself. So, for the most part, we're going to get into my thoughts here in a minute or two on this. But for the most part, I think Kyrian is still fine. It's important to note here that the Kyrian Covenant... the Kyrian Covenant Conduit only procs, I don't believe I have it here. Oh, I do actually, here. When a target dies under the effect of Scouring Tithe, you gain 10% increased damage here in Malefic Rapture for 10 seconds. So, looking at the Venthyr Impending Catastrophe one, which extends the duration by 50%. Looking at the Night Phase Soul Rot one, that increases the damage by 30%. And the actual Necrolord one, which gave you a chance to not consume a stack of Decimating Bolts. This one is essentially the only one that requires the target to die. It sort of works in an odd way. You can't guarantee this effect working. You're going to get the damage amp from Soul Ride every time. You're going to get the dot extension from Impending Catastrophe every time. And, I mean, the Necrolord one is RNG, but if you get it, you know, it's there. This one requires the target to die. So on a handful of fights, this is going to be a dead conduit. However, if that target dies, a 10% increase to your Rapture is relevant because you're also getting 5 shards back. So there are times you can actually put up Tithe on mobs, like on a boss fight, get those 5 shards, Rapture a bunch down with this conduit, then put it back up on your main target, keep rapturing, and keep going like nothing happened. It's also important to mention you can still Havoc Scouring Tithe, and if you Havoc it on 2 mobs and 1 target dies, you'll get the 5 shards from that mob, but if the second one lives and it expires, the cooldown resets as well. They didn't remove the actual Havoc part of Scouring Tithe in today's build. They actually made Decimating Bolt Havocable, I think, last build, so for the most part, it seems to be intended. So Kyrian's still solid for Destro. The Destro, Reign of Chaos, Reign of Fire, Wilfred's build, all that, boys, that still hasn't been touched. It's still pretty good. We're flying under the radar with that. Kyrian AF is still solid. We're going to be testing more with Night Fae AF this weekend. In last testing that I did with it, even with the actual conduit for the 30% damage increase, it wasn't crazy impressive. The dot damage was strong. I think it was around like 6-7% of our damage. But the thing is, it was higher than Scouring Tithe. But the thing is, the Soul Rot dot is a minute cooldown and is only active for 8 seconds. So you couldn't even get like full value out of a Rapture window with your Singularity and all that. Now, once again, the conduit is there for the damage increase, but even with that, I didn't think it was that impactful. And by the way, you don't even press Drain Life with that ability. It's still that bad. You don't even press Drain Life when you put up Soul Rot. You just put up the dot and move on. Soul Rot, Scouring Tithe, Impending Catastrophe, all those dots are extended by your Dark Lair, and all do also count towards your Rapture count here. So, for the most part today, TLDR, Necrolord got gutted a decent bit. If you're hoping to play a Venthyr, I don't know why that ability got hit so hard. It was good in plus, but it wasn't like insane, and it wasn't great single target. It was maybe a little overtuned, but a 50% gutting to the dot and an 80% gutting to the actual impact damage might be a bit excessive. And well, yeah. So I do want to take a little bit of time here and explain why I'm sort of frustrated with these changes. So let's just get into that, I suppose. See, I feel so passionate about this, I even went full screen for you guys. Now, I normally don't do these kind of, like, feedback-ish videos a whole lot where I just sort of talk about how I feel about things, but I think this is important to highlight. So when these changes came out today, it was basically on stream when I first started stream, and I'll admit I was disappointed. Obviously, it's unfortunate getting nerfed. It sucks. It is what it is. Warlocks are very good. I will still say right now, Warlocks are still good in Nathria, and we're still good in Mythic Plus. I'm not really mad about the damage nerfs. It sucks. They're excessive. I think they're too excessive. The Decimating Bolt nerfs are so excessive, I think they could just put it back to 3 stacks of Drain Soul and it'd be fine at this point. That's sort of what I'm hoping, by the way, boys. Next build, back to 3 stacks of Drain Soul. Maybe they just saw Salut's deep dive with myself, Shelly, and THC, and they're going to take our word for it. But being real here, the thing that bothers me is that Shadowlands looks really good. The dungeons look great. The raids look great. Aesthetically, I mean, look, this looks insane. Like, aesthetically, things look great. It looks really, really good. The issue is, this is what I was afraid of. This is what I'm worried about. It's what's going to happen once the expansion goes live. This kind of tuning is not what you really want to see 3 weeks before the expansion launches. The thing is, if this tuning had happened, like, in early beta, it'd be unfortunate, but it is what it is. All the raid testing of Castle Nathria has been done for like 2 months. We tested all the bosses like twice, 3 times. We've tested the dance boss like 5 times. Now is not the time for this kind of tuning. This should have been done in the middle of raid testing or before raid testing, or maybe after, and then tested a few things. But not 3 weeks before launch, not when pre-patches may be looming in 5 days. That's the unfortunate part, and it scares me because there's a lot to take into account here. Some classes are being buffed considerably. Some are being nerfed by a lot. Necrolord Drain Soul Affliction is the spec in the build. We played on every single boss for Affliction in all of raid testing. Nobody played Kyrian on any bosses. No one played Night Fae. No one played Venthyr. You played Necrolord Af. And now we have no data for any Warlock testing for any part of Castle Nathria. Or I guess more or less Blizzard doesn't. So, and they do to a certain extent. Obviously, they have their own internal test teams. But it's frustrating to me. I'm disappointed because I really hope the expansion is as good as I hope it's going to be. It looks great. The raid looks great. The dungeons look awesome. But this kind of tuning this late worries me. There are still some egregious outliers. Rogues were nerfed today. Hunters are still pretty insane. Frost mages still haven't been touched. And like, yeah, Warlock was nerfed. We're still good. We're still good. Obviously, listen, I'd like to play Necrolord or Venthyr. Those are my 2 favorite covenants aesthetically. I don't really care in the end. Like, I'll play whatever's best damage-wise, but I'd like to avoid playing Night Fae, and Kyrian is not my favorite covenant. All the zones look great, just thematically, it's a bit disappointing to see these changes this late. So, I'm hoping there are more, but I don't want you guys to misinterpret my frustration here as, oh, we got nerfed, we suck, that's that. Not the case at all. Locke is still good. Kyrian Af is still good. Kyrian Desher was still the best play and probably still is the best play. And, I mean, depending how Night Fae shakes up, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I'm just more or less worried at this point because this is the kind of tuning that I think we probably should have seen like 2 months ago in the middle of Mythic Castle Nathria testing. And it's not just Warlocks. It's every single class. Every single spec is getting these mass overhauls 2 weeks in a row. And we have launch in 26 days. I'm worried. So now I'm not saying that Blizzard can't do this. They can't tune everything within that time frame. They certainly can, and I have confidence that they can. But I'm just hoping that they do, and that I'm not wrong here. Because this is a great expansion, arguably the best they produced. The legendary system is the improved version of the Legion one. You can target effects. You can put it on 2 pieces of gear. Nathria looks amazing. There are always 1 or 2 bosses that are a bit, maybe, not my favorite, but it looks amazing. Denathrius looks incredible. Mythic Plus looks great. The affix changes, for the most part, I don't play Melee, look good. The dungeons are awesome. I've enjoyed it, but I just hope that we don't have a bit of a mess for the first few weeks of Shadowlands and have to correct it all in 9.1. So I don't want it to be misinterpreted as like I'm angry at the game or I'm bashing it. I'm not in the slightest. I just really, really hope that it works out and that it doesn't overshadow everything that is so good in Shadowlands. So thanks for watching the video, dudes. I appreciate it. Let me know what you guys think in the nerfs in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think about playing a blue Angel Warlock down there as well. Once again, any weak auras, profiles, add-ons you see here available to you guys for free on my Twitch. Swing by, grab and drop a follow, hang out, ask any questions anytime. That is the best place to get a hold of me. If you guys enjoyed the content and want to see more, feel free to hit that subscribe button below. Helps out a lot. Thanks again, dudes. I'll see y'all again soon on stream. Peace.